Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Art of Being a Woman. I'm your host, Courtney, and today we are discussing the art of refusing to settle for less. This is a topic that I am very passionate about because it's something that I wished someone would have discussed with me very openly and honestly when I was just beginning adulthood and I didn't really know what I wanted from life. Yet there were so many choices and decisions to make for the future. Many times when we are starting out in life and we have those big decisions to make for ourselves, there are many choices in life that we have to make. Some periods of our life, there are multiple choices to make at once, and it can be overwhelming. So we tend to choose what feels like it would give us the least amount of resistance, or we can be really motivated to pursue something without proof because we're passionate about something and we want to see it all the way through. I do have a bit of a mixed age range of listeners, which I love. I love that age doesn't really matter when it comes to dealing with life. We can think when we're younger that adults that are older or older generations don't understand us because times have changed, and older generations can think the same thing, that the younger generation doesn't get it because they weren't around when things were very different. And there's truth to that for sure. But there's also things that remain pretty consistent regardless of the generation you're born in and regardless of your life stage. And many times it has to do with our inner world and how we're responding to our circumstances and how we're responding to life. That pretty much stays the same. People often say that life is like a roller coaster. There's ups and downs, and it's true. We're never going to reach a point in life where everything is going great in every area of life constantly. There's always going to be a moment where we have to come down for a little bit and go through some discomfort and go through some challenges so that we can grow and expand and become more of ourselves ultimately. And everyone's life is different. We all have our own unique purpose in life. We have our own journey that our soul is carrying out. And some of us have decided to come here to really grow a lot and transform a lot. And that means that we're going to be challenged a lot. Now, why am I starting this podcast episode with all of that information? I'm starting it off that way because not everyone has this burning desire to really go after what it is that they want. For some people, it comes naturally. There's just those individuals that are more passionate. They're passionate about life. They're passionate about their hobbies. They're passionate about their health. You name it. And then there's those that passion doesn't come naturally. They prefer ease and comfort and predictability. And many times it comes from fear of the unknown. So we can encounter people in our life that will mean well and tell us to settle. Not because they don't think that we can achieve what it is that we have our mind set on and our heart set on, but it's because they feel like they're protecting you. And in their mind, that is how they protect themselves. They avoid challenging themselves too much because the uncertainty is very uncomfortable. This is why I really am very excited to discuss this topic, because we don't always have people in our life that will tell us to refuse to settle for less. I know in my life, I have not been surrounded by people that went after their dreams, that went after things that they were passionate about. And that's not shade. That's truly just an observation. It's very easy to tell when someone is lit up by their life, when they enjoy the life that they've created for themselves and the choices that they've made. And it's also very easy to tell when that's just not the case. Whether someone complains about their job constantly because they don't like it, or they just complain about their circumstances. Now, I'm not saying that I don't do any of those things. I try very hard to check myself and be really honest with myself when I am feeling frustrated with my life, because I know that ultimately, if I'm frustrated with my life and my circumstances, it's due to the choices that I've made for myself. And many times when I do that, when I confront myself, when I feel unhappy with certain areas of my life, I realize that I chose something that I didn't truly want, and I chose something out of fear, which means I settled. I didn't trust that by doing what I truly wanted on a soul level, that I would be protected and that things would work out for me. We're going to get into 4 steps that I wrote on my Instagram account and my Threads account at She Is Artfully Woman to really unpack this topic on a deeper level. And I will share a personal example that I recently went through that really forced me to relearn this lesson. Because many of the topics that I discuss here on the podcast, it's not something that you're only going to experience once. You're not only going to experience the desire to be a perfectionist once. You're not only going to release the need to control your life once. These are things that will constantly show up, and each time it will get easier and easier because you're mastering yourself and you're mastering the lessons that you've learned on this journey of life. So throughout this episode, think about your life and think about moments when you were given opportunities to settle for less and you know you didn't because you believed in yourself and you knew that you wanted better, you deserved better, and whatever was being presented to you didn't feel right. It didn't feel aligned. And I also want you to look back at your life and find moments when you know that you did settle for less. You settled because you were scared that if you really did what you truly wanted, things wouldn't work out or you wouldn't be safe. When you become aware of those choices that you've made out of fear, out of settling, I don't want you to feel shame. I don't want you to feel guilt. I just want you to become aware of those areas of life where you have settled, because you will be tested in those areas again. And like I always say, you're not being tested because you're being punished and because life is unfair and it's hard. No, you're being tested because life doesn't want you to settle. Life doesn't want you to choose a path that you didn't truly want to experience. I heard this analogy that really put things into perspective for me, and I want to share it with you. Basically, our soul is like a spaceship, and life is like outer space. Our soul purpose, and this includes our soul correction, is like the navigation system that is in the spaceship. And without us doing anything, the spaceship is following the navigation system. Now, occasionally, we're going to experience some turbulence, but ultimately, we're always going to stay on the path that the navigation is setting for us. And if for whatever reason, we decide to take a little break or take a detour, because we have free will, we're not going to necessarily be prevented from doing those things, but eventually, the navigation system will eventually reroute you and keep you on your aligned path. And the truth is, life is not a race. It's not about who can stay on the aligned path as long as possible without deviating until you reach the end, because then you would just die, and no one's rushing to die necessarily. So all the detours that we take, all the challenges and the bumps in the road on our journey are all purposeful, they're all perfect, and they all teach us things that ultimately bring us back to our path and bring us back to where we're meant to go. So remember that when you reflect back on the moments that you've settled for less in your life, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just taking a little detour and exploring more about yourself before continuing on your journey. The 4 steps that we're getting into are the following. Step 1, stop letting fear lower your standards. Step 2, recognize that almost right is still wrong. Step 3, be willing to have nothing rather than crumbs. And step 4, know your desires are powered by your discernment. Let's get straight into step 1. Stop letting fear lower your standards. This is a hard one because fear feels so real, and it really doesn't do any good to tell yourself or to tell anyone that's experiencing fear to just face your fears. It's really not that simple because our mind plays such strategic mind games on us, and it will truly create the worst case scenario in our mind to cloud our vision and prevent us from doing something that we've never done before. I actually spoke about fear in detail in one of my podcast episodes. It's episode 9, The Art of Transforming Fear into Power. I definitely recommend you listen to that episode if fear is holding you back in terms of settling on your dreams and on the things that you want in life. But to briefly cover it in this episode, fear truly exists so that we can overcome it. When I look back on my life and I think about all the things that I had fears around, behind those fears were the opportunity to become brave and the opportunity to become more confident. A personal example is public speaking. My whole life I hated public speaking. I really just assumed that it wasn't for me, clearly, because if it was, then I would be that person that just loved to be the center of attention. I would love to have all eyes on me, and I would love to present projects when I was in school. And I wasn't like that at all. I was the complete opposite. I did not like any eyes on me. I didn't like to be the center of attention. I did love to speak and talk to people one-on-one, but to speak to large groups of people, that really made me very anxious. And for most of my life, I really convinced myself that the reason why I had that fear was because I'm not meant to be in the spotlight. I'm not meant to be a public speaker. And there's so many other things that I can do with my time than public speaking. But what's so funny is that I have a podcast now, and that fear was really trying to convince me to never try. It was convincing me that whatever made up scenario of what could possibly happen would be so bad and so catastrophic that it's not worth pursuing at all, which is crazy when I think about it. Because if I were to be really objective and not get my feelings involved, even if the worst case scenario would happen, I would be okay. I wouldn't be physically hurt. I wouldn't die. My ego would be bruised. I would be embarrassed. But so what? Nothing actually happens to us when we get embarrassed. Nothing actually happens to us when we fail. It's just an ego blow. And fear comes from the ego. When we realize that it's our ego that doesn't want to be embarrassed, that doesn't want to take a leap of faith, that doesn't want to possibly be wrong for taking a chance, we can start to really check ourselves when fear starts to enter our mind and tries to influence our decisions. When I really learned about the truth of fear and how it relates to ego and the truth about ego, it became a lot easier for me to stop settling for less in my life, because I realized the moments in my life where I had an opportunity to settle for less, there was always one option that I was clinging to out of fear, whether it was fear that I wouldn't be safe, secure, or I just couldn't predict the future. And then there was the option of doing something that I really wanted to do deep down. It excited me, I felt aligned, but it was risky. I had no proof that I would be safe. I had no proof that I would be secure. I didn't know how things would unfold past making that decision. And because the brain likes to predict outcomes, it will assume that the choice that is the most predictable is the best choice. But that's not true. That just means you're going to choose something that's going to really keep you stuck exactly where you are, because we can only predict things that we've already experienced. This is why settling for less feels so frustrating when we become aware of it, because we know that we keep doing it to ourselves and we have this resentment. But who is this resentment even towards? It's honestly towards us, because we're making these choices when deep down we know we don't want them. We're allowing our ego to make decisions for ourselves. And that is very upsetting to our soul, which is the essence of who we are. A tip for this step would be to really clock yourself when you're about to choose something out of fear. Ask yourself, if I wasn't scared about the outcome, if I wasn't scared that I would be safe, that I would be protected, that things would work out for me, what would I choose? That is the best choice. Anytime we choose something out of fear, we are automatically settling for less. Step 2, recognize that almost right is still wrong. This is something that I had to learn through experience, and I think many of us will have to learn through experience. I can definitely sit here and tell you when I learned this lesson, but sometimes that's not enough. I remember I started working as an OT this past year for the first time, and I intentionally didn't want to work 5 days a week because it was my first time working as a professional. I wasn't sure how demanding the workload would be, and I didn't want to bite off more than I can chew. So I told the agency that I work with that I'm available for 3 days a week. Now, even making that decision triggered a lot of fear within me because up until this point, I was always making a pretty low salary, especially because I was in graduate school. So the idea that I can work only 3 days a week and still be financially secure was so foreign to me that I almost couldn't believe that I would be okay if I only worked 3 days a week. It wasn't until I really sat down, plugged in the numbers, and started calculating my monthly expenses, I realized, yeah, this could work. I could financially be secure and safe if I only work for 3 days a week, that I decided to make that aligned decision for myself. And I did not settle for what I didn't want, which was working for 5 days a week. Now, luckily that worked out. But while I was working that job, the agency would occasionally ask me, oh, do you want to work one more day in a different school? There's another school that's right next to you that you can work in. And I remember I would struggle to make a decision when part of me already knew that I didn't want to work more than 3 days a week, but then my fear would kick in and say, but couldn't you use the money? Couldn't you really just add on another day just in case something were to happen financially and you need extra funds? Every time the agency would reach out to me asking me if I wanted to pick up more work, I wouldn't know what to do because one option sounded logical, but the idea of doing it made me miserable. And the other option was completely unlogical, if that's even a word. The other option was not logical at all. It was just something that I knew I didn't want to do. It made me happy to not have to work more than 3 days for the first time in my life. And it took that sort of scenario to occur multiple times for me to realize that no matter what the opportunity is, I will never settle on my happiness in my career. And just a funny side note, they offered me another job after I said no thanks at least 3 times. And they said, we would pay you extra for doing this. And I honestly considered it, when the truth was, I already decided that it wasn't aligned for me to take on more work. And I just wanted to share that because the universe is smart like that, and it will constantly test you in certain areas where you do tend to settle for less so that you can really grow and you can become more confident in what is really aligned for you. It was in that moment when I was offered more money that I had to really ask myself, is my happiness able to be bought out? Am I able to be convinced to go against what I really want just because I'm being offered more money? And the answer was no. I didn't take it. And the people around me definitely thought I was crazy. My family definitely thought I was a little crazy because for them, they didn't have this luxury of making a decent amount of money that you're not desperate to take on as much work as possible, as many hours as possible. And I get it, but I have to be willing to be seen as crazy. I have to be willing to be misunderstood in order to stay true to myself. And I've accepted that and I've come to terms with that. So if you are in a situation in your life where things aren't exactly how you want them to be and you're unhappy, you have to be really honest with yourself and ask yourself, how important is your happiness to you? It sounds so selfish to say that. I feel like in this world, to put your happiness first sounds a little spoiled, perhaps, but you really can't make the world a better place if you're miserable. And we know when we're miserable. We know when we're unhappy with something. It doesn't have to be the most dramatic situation in the world. You can truly not like your job and not know why. It can pay you well, but you just don't like it. You can live somewhere that you just don't like living. And yes, there's people that would die to live where you live. There's also people that would die to have your job, but that doesn't mean that you have to settle for it because it's not what you want and it's your life. Make your happiness your priority and don't settle on your happiness, because when we do that to ourselves and we settle on our happiness, we end up having to pay for it later on in life because our soul already has its path set out for itself. And again, we can take the detours, but eventually it's going to course correct and we're going to be put back on our path. Step 3, Be willing to have nothing rather than crumbs. This was one of the hardest things for me. I'm not sure if it's because I grew up not having a lot of money. I think that's what it was. Because I didn't have that financial security of always having things, I would always cling to what I had because I would rather have something than have nothing. That feeling of having nothing at a young age really made me unhappy. It made me feel very out of control in my life. And that whole mentality followed me into my early adulthood too. It wasn't until there was a quote that found me. I swear it found me at a young age. It was in one of my books that I have still. And it says, "You must empty your cup before it can be filled anew." And it was actually an astrology book. And it was the quote that it gave for my exact birthday, November 2nd. I knew that it was definitely calling me out for something. I didn't fully understand it the first time I read it, but every time I would go back to it and reread it, I would gain a deeper insight into what it was trying to tell me about myself. And I realized that was what I was missing. That was what I wasn't getting. In order for me to receive everything that I want from life and receive exactly what I want from life or better, I have to be able to release everything that I do not want. I can't be holding on to things out of fear and desperation and expect the universe to give me what I want, because I'm clearly showing that I don't trust that I will get what I want. And I clearly don't trust myself to not have what I want for a period of time. It's very easy to get caught up in life and to think that things outside of ourselves makes us happy, but it's not. It just keeps us comfortable. And comfort is like taking a detour on your spaceship and forgetting to get back on the ship. We can't do that. We didn't come here to stay in one spot our whole life. But when we hold on to things out of fear, and we hold on to things because we don't trust that where we're going is going to lead us to a better place, we end up settling for much longer than we needed to settle for. And this applies to more than just holding on to things. It's also holding on to people, holding on to relationships. It can be really hard to be in a relationship with someone for years and then realize that it's not making you happy anymore, because then you have to deal with the fear of making the wrong decision by choosing your happiness over what you've built in the relationship. And you also have to deal with the fear of being alone for quite some time until you meet a new person that is more aligned with what you want. Sometimes we're just not there yet. Sometimes it's too hard to have nothing. So we choose the crumbs. We choose the almost right thing for us because we don't want to sit in the discomfort. We don't want to sit in that in-between space of uncertainty, of the unknown. We don't want to be alone. But I promise you, that is where your strength and your confidence is built. When you're alone, when you have nothing, when you honor your happiness so deeply that you don't allow what you don't truly want to get in your way. The desires that we have don't go away. We can really try to suppress them and convince ourselves that if we have even a little bit of what we want, then we're happy. But once we get used to having a little bit of what we want, it starts to feel like not enough. And it's not because we're ungrateful. It's because it was never what we wanted. We were just not being honest with ourselves out of fear. In some of my relationships in my past, I stayed longer than I knew I should have because I wasn't willing to have nothing. I wasn't willing to be alone. I didn't like that idea at all. I like to socialize. I like to connect with people. And I didn't want to lose that, even though I knew that the relationships that I was in weren't making me happy. They weren't meant for me. And the only way that I got out of those relationships was when I got to a point where I told myself, I'd rather have nothing. I'd rather be alone. I'd rather have no friends. I'd rather have no romantic relationship than to lie to myself, than to settle and pretend that I'm happy when I'm not. And those moments were liberating at first, but then they get a little scary if you're not used to being alone. They get a little uncomfortable because you are forced to sit with your feelings by yourself, and you're forced to sit with the feelings that honestly never surfaced when you were distracted with other people. Many times unconsciously we do that. We will busy ourselves with other people, their lives, their business, and always making plans to avoid sitting with ourselves because that makes us uncomfortable. If that is you, if you relate to that, know that it's normal and know that it's going to be uncomfortable in the beginning, but ultimately you will reach that inner peace. You will learn to love your own company and it will not feel unsettling or intimidating. We must be really careful to not settle for crumbs because when we do that, we think we're protecting ourselves from disappointment, but we're truly creating that disappointment. It just doesn't show up immediately. It shows up down the line when we're looking back and we realize, wow, we knew for quite some time that this wasn't what we wanted and we settled. Step 4, know your desires are powered by your discernment. Something that I realized in my own life was that the more I would say no to the things that I truly didn't want, to the things that weren't aligned, the more opportunities started to come in. The more the bar was rising on what the universe and what God was offering me. Because I was telling the universe, I was telling God, I know what I want. And you can send me half of what I want, 3/4 of what I want. And it's all nice. I appreciate it. Thank you. But no, thank you. Because it's not what I want. And I know that you can give me what I want or something better. Many times when we are being tested in that way and we are being offered crumbs, we can think that this is in my life for a reason. This opportunity is in my life for a reason. I must accept it. But that's not the case. The truth is, when we are being given crumbs as opportunities, it's to test our discernment and it's to test our ability to trust ourselves, to trust that we can receive what it is that we want. And it tests our ability to trust in God, to trust the universe. And when I say God, I talk about the God that's all love, all giving, all positive energy. And because that's what I believe in, I know that he's not limited in what he's able to give me. It's only a matter of, am I open enough to receive it? And that's really what refusing to settle for less is all about. We have to make sure that we are open enough to receive what it is that we want. And every time we refuse to settle for less, we become more open. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please rate this podcast. I would greatly appreciate it. And share this with a friend or a family member if you know that they can benefit from it. I love you so much. Have a great week. Until next time, bye for now.